Cuyahoga River in Ohio in 1969. You may be wondering what the deal is with the fire and all the smoke. Well, the Cuyahoga River was so polluted and it was covered in oil and waste runoff from nearby manufacturing plants that it actually caught fire and burned for nearly half an hour. This was the final straw in a growing environmental movement of the 1960s, and it spurred the government under Richard Nixon to create the Environmental Protection Agency. This agency's mission was to establish and enforce environmental protection standards, provide assistance to others combating environmental problems, conduct environmental research, and assist the CEQ in developing and recommending to the President new policies for environmental protection. Since its inception, it has saved hundreds of thousands of lives and cleaned millions of acres in land and water. But it's in jeopardy of losing its funding, and it needs your support. As an environmental science major, I cringe at the idea of the EPA no longer being around after everything that it's done for us. Here are just a few of the important things the EPA has done in its history. First is the Clean Air Act of 1970. This set national air quality standards for auto emissions and manufacturing plant emissions. It also led to the production of the catalytic converter, which cut carbon monoxide poisoning from the automobiles. In the first 20 years of the Clean Air Act, it prevented more than 200 premature births due to cutting the amount of lead and sulfur dioxide in the air. The next thing that the EPA did was they banned the use of lead-based paint in children's toys. According to the American Academy of Child-Adolescent Psychology, lead in children can lead to delayed growth, hearing loss, cancer, brain damage, and even death. And this was being used on children's toys. So this was a very important thing that the EPA was able to get rid of. Next was DDT in pesticide. Now DDT is especially harmful because it will remain in your body forever. It never siphons out, and it will sit in your kidneys, your lungs, and your body tissue and continue to grow. What the DDT will do, it has been known to cause reproductive issues, birth defects, and cancer. The EPA also enacted the Clean Water Act in 1972. This was to maintain and prevent pollution of the nation's water and the integrity of the wetlands. Before this Clean Water Act came out, there was really no provisions for drinking water, and this really helped to clean up the water, making it a lot safer for everybody. Now in 1978, in Love Canal, New York, there was a situation where buried leaking chemical containers, they began leaking into the environment, and it caused birth defects and a higher than normal average of stillbirths in this area. They discovered the high levels of chemicals, and this led to Congress enacting a policy called the Superfund Act. What this Superfund Act did was it made the companies who were liable for the damage, it made them actually have to pay for the medical bills and to clean up the environment. The Love Canal disaster was brought on by Hooker Chemical, and they were forced to pay over $100 million for the cleanup and the restoration and the medical expenses. In 2007, the largest liable claim was filed against BP for an oil spill in the Alaska tundra, and an oil refinery fire that killed 15 people. The fine for this was $462 million. However, BP may sound familiar to you because they were also involved in the nation's largest oil spill in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. Those fines have yet to be set, but the early estimates are BP will have to pay $5 to $20 billion for the cleanup and restoration of the Gulf. So you may think that some of these things are kind of far away, but a little closer to home, Omaha.com reports that the EPA has just cleaned the 10,000th yard in Omaha from lead poisoning that came from the old Asarco plant. Just within levels of toxins in children have already declined rapidly, and the lead amounts in the blood dropped from an average of 33% to 2% per person on average. And getting back to the Superfund, Act, a Sarco plant was forced to pay $220 million to offset some of the costs of the lead removal. So as you can see, the EPA has already done an enormous amount of work to maintain our nation and to keep it healthy, and it will continue to do so every day. Yet it's in jeopardy of losing its funding if one of these men is to win the 2012 election. The forerunners for the Republican Party, Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, and Newt Gingrich, all oppose the EPA, saying that it costs more than good that it's done. And they have vowed to significantly cut the funding if they were elected. We need to remind these gentlemen, either by emails, letters, or not voting for them, that we support the EPA and we do not want it to lose funding. According to a Jack Lewis article on the birth of the EPA, in 1969, at the inception of the EPA, the then Interior of the State Secretary, Russell Train, said that if environmental deterioration is permitted to continue and increase at present rates, man wouldn't stand a snowball's chance in hell of surviving. So imagine a world without the EPA. Undrinkable water, toxic land, air, trash covering every inch of the country. I mean, do you remember the picture I showed you at the beginning? This was the Cuyahoga River before the EPA. This is a picture of the present-day Cuyahoga River after the EPA and what it's done. Which would you rather live in? Thank you.